Okay, more on Herodotus, and man, this book, book three, is what we want to focus on today. But this Herodotus, he's plotted the books, the later books, that we're are not going to read in the World Civ class are they point us toward the Battle of Marathon, then the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of Salamis. Here, the Battle of Thermopylae, the battle for the West. Somehow, that Spartan 300 is the story that is what we want to believe is the West, and it's usually turned into a pro-Greece, pro-Spartan story, which not Herodotus does just everything, and the only way we know about all this is with Herodotus. Herodotus is a source. Look at this: the naval encounter that saved Greece and Western civilization. Dubious ideas, but on the other hand, this is the importance of Herodotus. Without Herodotus, we wouldn't have knowledge of so many people and institutions and battles and stories. He's an amazing source for us. And so I want to look into his story of politics today, and his story of the magi, this undermining of the empire's politics when Cambyses turns into the worst. Cyrus's son Cambyses turns into the worst kind of possible monarch. A crazy guy becomes monarch. Too much power for too long in one place, especially a crazy person. That's a recipe for disaster. So there's a magi who, over the bureaucracy, overthrows and puts up a deception. And then along comes sort of a Magnificent Seven story in which Darius and Megabesus and Otanes and some four other guys sort of lead a overthrow of government and then have to decide. It's a constitutional convention, a type of like lull. Well, we've just removed a government. What kind of government does Persia want? One of the great moments in history, and we want to talk about that today. In this vast Persian Empire, most powerful entity in the world, and yet it sits on a sort of fragile system of a government that is on top, trying to manage what is a lot of client kings, a lot of client queens, as we'll run into with Artemisia, and sort of a coalition of bodies underneath. Cyrus establishes the imperial model in which we don't try and overthrow governments. We actually have a model of system built on cultural diversity, toleration, as long as you don't rebel, pay your taxes, supply soldiers, and basically sort of do the minimum. Okay, so it's a very minimal loyalty that holds everything together. Okay. A minimal happiness. With the story of Xerxes in the beginning of the book of book of Esther, is the keeping all these tributaries happy from Afghanistan all the way to Egypt, up to Greece and everything like that. Okay, so just real quickly, want to just I wanted to point out this crucial story of the government. But first, this is this amazing thing that we get here is with Herodotus is a statement that in the rise of Darius, Cyrus was a father figure. You could love Cyrus, and Cyrus looked out for the benefit of the household, the whole. And so Cyrus is like a father of the country, type of George Washington character. And then Cambyses is his crazy tyrannical son. And so he's to move out. And then Darius. And Darius is said here to be a tradesman, a retailer, the true bureaucrat type of figure, who is interested in taxation, interested in connecting all the dots, a royal road, building infrastructure, largely for the benefit of stability, because if there's stability, he'll get wealthy and he'll get feeling easy and living large. And one of the fun stories that we'll talk about is his relationship with Atossa is in tension with this. But the Darius as a retailer and such like that, he becomes the monarch who sort of keeps things organized. And in that sense, that's what the Roman Empire later honors, especially out of Augustus. I found the empire made of bricks or something left out of marble. I'm the one who connects it all up. I'm the one who brings stability. And so that becomes Darius. And Darius is a monarch, and he has to argue for monarchy. If we go, the story, one of the things about the book is I just wanted to, there's things in it which make us think, oh gosh, this guy, Herodotus, is telling us all sorts of wild stories. One of which is being how Phoenicians were hired by the Egyptians to sail all the way around the continent of Africa. This is a big deal. 600 BC. I think it's Necho or something is the pharaoh. And so a long time, this was thought, this is sort of crazy story. But on the other hand is that one of the things that Herodotus says is that the Phoenicians perceived the sky, the stars, to change. And this is what would happen in the southern hemisphere. Herodotus doesn't know the world's a sphere, and so he doesn't have some physics of a southern hemisphere. But he reports it, he hears it. And so therefore he himself says, I don't really believe these Phoenicians got all the way around Africa, but we read it and go, gosh, they must have, because how else would they have known about this sky moving? So there's a lot of indicators in Herodotus that this guy knew what he was talking about and really had his finger on something. Now, this leads us up to this story of this magi deception, which here again, folks had said father of lies is sometimes he's telling stories. It can't be true. And the story of the Magi deception and the coming of the new government is a story which doesn't enhance the Greeks. It's a story that it's Greek ideas of the one, the few, the many, Greek ideas of government, Greek ideas of choosing of a rational decision on how to rule a country. The Greeks don't like the idea that the Persians are presented in Herodotus as being the ones who think these things through well. And so they don't like it. So, that's got to be myth. Well, in the late 19th century, this is Behistun, which is the, between Iran, the Iranian plateau down into Iraq on the rivers, is this town of and up here are these carvings in the wall. And they got up there finally and started in the 19th century figuring out this writing on the wall as to what the story is. And this story is of Darius getting rid of the Magi. A story which similar enough to Herodotus that it really backs up Herodotus's story as, this is true. Now, and then what's we'll get into this here. Let's go back to my map here. All right. And so in book 3, when you get to this, this fascinating place where a republican constitution is sort of discussed, a lot of the basic discussions that go on in the American Constitutional Convention, the basic discussions of good government throughout history as to republican government, what we call checks and balance systems, things like this. They have their roots in what is a statement, which is a really sort of awkwardly powerful statement. It's a statement that there are 3 types of government. There's the one, the few, and the many. There's monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. Monarchy, aristocracy, democracy. There's the king, the Senate, and the people. Okay, democracy, power to the people. Well, where is the first place that we sort of see that clear statement that there's not 5 types of government, not 9 types of government, not 2 types of government. There are 3, which is going to be for Aristotle, for all sorts of people, a very powerful statement, and it comes down to us today. It comes in Darius. Darius actually says it in, section 82. take the three forms of government we are considering: democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. Okay. And wow, so Darius, the Darius in the Bible, the Darius emperor, Persian emperors, the guy sitting around discussing political theory in terms of the three types of government first. That bothers a lot of people. And Herodotus knows it's going to bother people. It's going to bother people, especially in Greece. And so he tells us, Herodotus does, is that after the magi are their deception is taken care of, we have 5 days later, when the excitement had died down, the conspirators, the seven, met to discuss the situation in detail. At that meeting, certain speeches were made. Some of the Greeks refused to believe that they actually were made at all. Nevertheless, they were. I love that. Herodotus often will be softer, but this is one of the very strong ones where he goes, listen to me, I'm telling you the truth. You Greeks aren't going to like hearing this, but I'm telling you the truth. And why wouldn't the Greeks like to hear it? Because they like to think of themselves as like the real political thinkers. But no, here it is. Now, here's the fun thing. This is where we're reading ancient stuff in translation. And so he's writing in Greek. So we're, what was actually said in that meeting would have not been in Greek. I don't know, some Proto-Farsi. I don't know what they were speaking. But the thing is that the language of democracy, monarchy, and oligarchy, the one, the few, the many, is Greek language, Greek terms. Okay. But the thing is that Herodotus is saying not that the Darius spoke in Greek. It's not that, they were said in Greek. Something like this was said. The gist of this is true. And we can, Herodotus only spends a couple pages discussing it. So we can expect that this lasted a long time. These speeches were a lot longer. And so this is where Thucydides, who follows Herodotus, he will say, I have the right as a historian to give the gist of speeches, to summarize them, to translate their language and stuff like that. And see, that's what Herodotus is doing too. He's not telling you he's doing it, but this is you're a commonsensical person. You know that Darius doesn't speak Greek, so you realize that when he says out and out, nevertheless they did, these speeches took place. He is not asserting an absolute word for word transcription. He is saying, I heard these things and I believe they're true. And so that's where we get this. And one of the most foundational documents in the politics of the whole world today. You go around the world today, and every modern government that purports to be a modern government structures it some way around having an executive, a council, a senate, a one, the few, and then the people being represented in some way. And so you have the People's Republic of China. You have, Iran is a republic. It's the Republic of Iran. I mean, republic is the term that's used all around the world. The basic ideas of republic is a mixture of these three types of government. Now, Persia is not mixing these three types of government, but what Darius is saying, there's three types of government, and we've got to figure out which one of the governments we want to use. But take a moment to be amazed. You need a breath of fresh air? Be amazed. Be amazed. It's great stuff. All right, so what happens is that the first speaker is Otnes. And Otnes gives us a promotion of democracy, in which the reason for democracy is largely because we don't like monarchy. And so he gives us our first really clear statement that what we should build government upon is fear of power, fear of too much power in one place for too long. And so he then says, monarchy is, you'd think it'd be pleasant and good, but it's not. For even the best men raised to such a position would be bound to change for the worst. It's the fundamental 450 years BC, power corrupts. Power corrupts people. And so the big theories aren't here yet, but the thing is that this idea that you got to run a state differently than you would run a family, because dad gets to always be dad. But the thing is, in a state, what you need to do is actually diversify power and not, because power is going to corrupt people. Nobody ever says dad's going to be corrupt because dad's dad too long. No, it's corruption in the state like this. So he says, this basically it's pride and envy. And you'd think that a monarch wouldn't have pride and envy, but no, pride and envy will pull them down. Absolute power ought, by rights, preclude envy and the principle that a man who possesses of it will also command everything we could wish for. But the fact is, as the behavior of kings has shown, that they're jealous, and the best of them is not all that great. Okay, so what does he say positively about democracy? Well, it forces equality under the law. And here we have the use of the Greek term, which is the term that comes down to us as equality. And so an ideal government somehow that is not a monarchy gives popular sovereignty, power to the people, democracy, demos, and krat meaning power. So power to the demos, And then what would that promote? A type of equality, some sort of equality under the law, not some complete equality, but equality under the law. Those two paragraphs, man, that's the roots. That's, Herodotus is read by people for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And so our founding fathers, like James Madison read this, this is the roots of a deep tradition of power's corruption, and that you need to build a state around the fear of too much power in one place too long. And hence you have voting and term limits and veto and things like that. Checks and balances will come. Now, Otanes is rejected by the rest of them. No, you can't give power to the people. It's too unstable. So Megabesis gives the argument that monarchies are bad. Yeah, power corrupts. But democracies turn into mobs. They're unstable. And so they're a fickle lot, is what he says. So the best thing to do is the few, a type of senate. Now, this is what the Lycurgus, and maybe, because this is after Lycurgus, Herodotus writes that Lycurgus is before this. Maybe, there's some sort of picking up on Lycurgus, because the Romans will say they get most of their ideas from Lycurgus. But here, what we have is then Darius comes along and says, no, there's these three types, and he does what is basically what Plato does, which is take a philosophical statement and not building it off of the facts of what kings actually do, like Otanes does. He says, no, you take the best person and you make that person king, and you will have the best government, like a philosopher kings or something like that. Okay, best form of government is a monarchy. And so what you have is a great, powerful foundation. 450, 460 years BC, it's written down. It would have happened, around 500 BC, right around the same time that Rome says that it's being founded. This very strong statement of there are three types of government: democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. Each of them has problems. Monarchy, however, is presented as the most dangerous because power corrupts. But on the other hand, is that monarchy has the potential, if you have the best person, to make the best government. Yeah. Herodotus. So you go back to this statement at the beginning of that Cyrus is a father figure and looked out for the best of all. Is fundamentally, Cyrus is a model of, what George Washington is a model, sort of a founding father who's benign, and power doesn't corrupt them to the point where they oppress people. Darius, however, is a retailer. He's not presented as someone who's actually the great philosopher king or the best of men. He's actually rather mundane character in some ways. Okay, and we're going to talk about that next time when we talk about Atossa and why Darius goes off to fight in Marathon, the Battle of Marathon. Okay, let me get out of that. Here again, that's book 3, and that's exciting stuff.